Hi. So today we continue our discussion on investments. Assuming that one has followed reasonable principles of budgeting and savings, the question becomes what to do with our savings. From an outflow perspective, we must pay close attention to the concept of timing, meaning we must consider how much of our savings is targeted. For example, if savings is targeted for a singular purpose, like buying a house, paying for kids' college or wedding, or some future special vacation, or even retirement, we have to choose investments suited for the timing associated with that event. Our savings may not be targeted to anything specific, with general growth as much as possible as the goal. In any case, the aspect of investments that most people grapple with is risk. Risk management exists in all aspects of our lives. This is a theme that I continually refer to in the topics presented. We must not be afraid to take risks. Risk refers to the fact that when we make our choices, we often do not know the outcomes of those choices with certainty. Consider the old but profound expression, there are no guarantees, as there are often none. However, that should not stop us from acting, because often the decision not to act is the worst decision of all. In many cases, people risk time, which is a precious commodity and often wasted, as we will commit to activities that sometimes prove fruitless and in worst cases harmful. In the most extreme cases, people lose their lives. So there is risk in everything. Drinking and driving comes to mind. However, fatalities can occur when driving completely sober. So the fact of injuries in accidents in driving should alone not preclude us from driving, should it? Anyway, we are here to discuss risk in investing that might cause a hit to savings, something we always wish to avoid. But risk in some form is always there, and to handle those risks requires knowledge, thoughtful analysis, and discipline. The knowledge is to understand the risk of potential investments, namely understanding the range of outcomes and some estimate of the likelihoods or probabilities of those outcomes. The analysis is a combination of objectively taking this information and combining with our subjective goals and deciding with discipline how to invest while being cognizant of potential risky outcomes and our goals. To do so successfully, we must understand the risk of our choices, and the failure to do so can be of great detriment to our financial health. In many of the subsequent topics, as we discuss selected asset classes, we will discuss the associated risk of those asset classes. For now, we need to understand some elementary fundamentals of risk-taking. Investment risk refers to the fact that sometimes our choice of investments are poor and leads to a loss of funds. The first fundamental is that risk can be very different from one asset class of investments to the next, as risk can vary from almost none to very high. Thus, we have to choose which risk profile fits us. So, why should we ever lean towards some of the higher risk classes? This is because of our second fundamental principle, and that is, in general, over the long term, and it might be vague what long term means, taking greater investment risk will generally lead to greater average growth. Growth is often referred to as our return on investments, and quite simply, if one does not consider the vagaries of humankind, like cheating and theft in the markets, the markets will efficiently reward risk taken over long periods of time with more returns. However, there is a cost to this. The cost is that in taking those higher risks, there's also the enhanced likelihood of bigger losses in the unfavorable scenarios, which in the most extreme cases can be massive losses to our investment, and in some cases cause us to get wiped out. Thus you have the query, can you afford to do that? Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. So the second principle can be summarized as the more risk that you take, meaning the more risk you expose yourself to the potential for losses, the more you are expected to make in returns over long periods of time. Unless, of course, you pick absolutely foolish and ridiculously high-risk choices, either due to a lack of knowledge or because you like to gamble and you lack the discipline to control your desire to reap windfall profits fast. The third general principle of risk that we wish to discuss today is the concept of age. When you are young and early in your careers, one might be more venturesome with one's investments and take more risk because in the unfavorable scenarios where loss of wealth occurs, the impact is less dire since you have more time to recover. Now, as a result of trying a risky strategy, you may suffer a bad outcome, and as a result, you may have to buy a smaller house or no house at all, or cut out a nice vacation if you make the bad investments early. But indeed, youth will be served, as you will have time to come back from adverse outcomes. In contrast, if you are an older person, say in your late 50s, and hoping to retire in the next decade, subjecting your carefully accumulated retirement savings to higher risk outcomes can cause a crimp in your life endgame that financially you may not be able to recover, and thus destine yourself to the unfortunate state of financial hardship in your twilight years. Now honestly, who wants that? Risk. To be continued. Thank you very much.